Tonight, we begin a quiet journey, a gentle Zen sleep story for deep sleep, stress relief, and a calm mind. This journey will carry you into rest and leave small seeds of peace in your thoughts. There is nothing you need to accomplish here. No lessons to study, no techniques to memorize. Only timeless truths offered softly, guiding you back to the calm that has always lived within you. Before we begin, if you feel like it, you can share what time it is and where you are listening from. Zen teaches that peace is not something we must create. Peace is something we uncover, like a clear mountain lake that only becomes cloudy when it is stirred. The mind grows heavy when it struggles and grasps. As we move through this story and these quiet teachings, you may notice your breathing naturally deepening, your body naturally relaxing. You do not need to force it. Rest is the natural response of a mind that no longer has to hold everything so tightly. There is nowhere else you need to be right now. Nothing else you need to do. Simply breathe with me as we begin this gentle path into sleep. In a remote mountain monastery, there lived a master named Kosen, known throughout the region for his vast collection of ancient texts. For over 40 years, he had carefully gathered rare Buddhist scriptures, philosophical writings, and poetry from across the land. Scholars would travel for weeks just to sit in his library, where treasures waited that could not be found anywhere else. The library itself felt like a sanctuary. Wooden shelves, carved by skilled hands, rose from floor to ceiling. Each scroll was wrapped in silk and placed with patient care. The room carried the clean scent of cedar and aged paper, and morning light filtered through paper windows, casting a warm glow across centuries of collected wisdom. Kosen spent his early hours each day in this sacred space, reading by candlelight before the other monks awakened. One autumn night, while the monaster, I slept, a fire moved through the community. The mountain wind fed the flames, and they spread quickly through the wooden halls. The monks found their way out safely, but there was no time to carry anything with them. They stood together in the courtyard, watching as their home disappeared into light and smoke. The library burned with fierce heat. Ancient texts, rare manuscripts, and carefully wrapped scrolls were swallowed in moments, turning to ash and drifting into the night air. 40 years of patient collecting vanished before the sun could rise. When morning finally came, the air was quiet. The ground was dark with embers, and thin smoke curled up from the ruins. The monks gathered around their teacher, expecting to find him broken by the loss. Instead, they found Kosen sitting calmly on a stone, watching the last ribbons of smoke rise from the place where his beloved library had stood. His face held no anger, no grief, no regret. One young monk, unable to hold back his confusion, approached with tears in his eyes. "Master," the student said, his voice trembling, "how can you be so peaceful? All those precious teachings, all those years of work, everything is gone. Does this loss not break your heart?" Kosen looked at him with gentle compassion. "My dear friend," he said softly, "those books held beautiful words about truth, but they were not truth itself. The real Dharma was never written on paper or stored on shelves. It lives here." He rested his hand over his own chest. "And it lives here." He gestured toward the student's heart. "Fire cannot burn what is truly precious." The young monk still struggled to accept it. "But Master, think of all the wisdom that is lost forever. Future generations will never be able to read those texts." Kosen smiled, peaceful and steady. "The fire has given us a great teaching," he said. "It has shown us the difference between the finger pointing at the moon and the moon itself. We spend so much time polishing and protecting the finger, that we sometimes forgot to look at what it was pointing toward. He rose slowly and placed a gentle hand on the young monk's shoulder. "Yesterday, I was a keeper of books," Kosen said. "Today, I am simply a teacher. Yesterday, I worried about protecting old wisdom. Today, I am free to live it directly. The fire has not taken anything away. It has only revealed what was always here." In the days that followed, as the community began to rebuild, something quietly changed. Without the constant effort of managing and protecting his great collection, Kosen's teaching became simpler, clearer, and more alive. Students who arrived expecting to study rare texts found something even rarer. They found a living presence, a teacher who embodied what the books had tried to describe. Kosen came to see that his attachment to preserving the Dharma had, in small and unseen ways, kept him from expressing it fully. The fire had released him from being a careful curator of wisdom and allowed him to live that wisdom plainly, in each ordinary moment. This story points to something essential in Zen. Acceptance is not pretending to like what happens. Kosen did not celebrate the fire, and he did not force himself to feel cheerful about losing the library. He simply met reality as it was, and he allowed it to teach him. In Zen, we learn that resisting what has already happened becomes a deep form of suffering. We spend our strength fighting what cannot be undone, replaying it, arguing with it, wishing it were different. And that struggle drains the life from the present moment. When we stop battling reality, something soft opens inside us. A quiet freedom appears, a steadiness that no outer event can easily disturb. The fire in this story is like the unexpected losses and changes that life brings. Sometimes it burns through our plans, our familiar roles, our treasured possessions, even the story we tell ourselves about who we are. Our first instinct is to call it tragedy, to treat it as an enemy of peace. But Zen invites a deeper look. What if a loss can also be a release? What if something that disappears was, without our noticing, holding us tightly? Kosen discovered that his effort to preserve wisdom had become an obstacle to living it. And in the quiet after the flames, he was freed, Rom being a keeper of truth, and allowed to simply become it. This teaching touches every part of our lives. When we lose a job we thought defined us, we may discover strengths and talents we never had to use before. When a relationship ends, we might find a quiet capacity for solitude and self-reliance that makes us steadier. When illness limits the body, we sometimes uncover inner resources that are far more lasting than physical ability. Acceptance begins with a simple recognition. What has already happened has already happened. Resistance cannot rewrite the past, but acceptance can shape what comes next. When we stop fighting what is, we become open to what might be. And as you listen, you may notice how the body softens when it no longer braces against imagined threats. This is the feeling of acceptance, not giving up, but a wise yielding that saves your energy for what truly matters. Now, let us turn to another story, one that shows how acceptance can transform our relationship, with the imperfection itself. There was once a young student named Daiki who came to study at a mountain monastery, known for its exquisite gardens. Daiki had always been drawn to beauty and perfection. He believed that learning to tend these famous gardens would bring him closer to awakening. He imagined spending his days among perfectly arranged flowers, carefully measured pathways, and trees pruned into ideal forms. On his first morning, the head gardener, an elderly monk named Sosin, led Daiki on a slow walk through the grounds. They passed through sections of remarkable beauty, where everything seemed to grow in harmony. Cherry trees formed gentle arches over stone paths. Moss-covered rocks lay in patterns that felt almost intentional. Streams flowed with soft musical sounds over carefully placed stones. But as they continued, they came to a section that seemed forgotten. Here, plants grew wild and untamed. Weeds pushed up between stones. Branches reached in odd directions. At the center of this unkempt area stood an ancient pine tree, twisted and bent by decades of mountain storms. Its trunk curved in 3 directions. Its branches stretched at strange angles. Its bark was scarred and weathered, as if time itself had left fingerprints on the wood. Daiki looked at the tree with clear distaste. "Master Sosin," he said, "surely this old tree harms the beauty of your garden. Why not remove it and plant something more pleasing, something that grows straight and strong like the other pines?" Sosin stopped walking and gazed at the twisted tree with quiet affection. "This tree," he said gently, "is my greatest teacher. It has shown me what the perfect specimens could never reveal." Daiki frowned, confused. What could this damaged tree possibly teach that a healthy one cannot? Sosin walked closer and placed his weathered hand on the gnarled bark. "This tree has been here for over 200 years, he said. "It has survived storms that destroyed younger, straighter trees. It has bent without breaking. It has adapted without losing its essential nature. Every curve in its trunk tells a story of resilience. Every twisted branch speaks of a creative response to difficulty." Then he looked back at Daiki with eyes full of warmth. "The straight trees in the formal garden are beautiful, yes, but their beauty depends on perfect conditions. They must be protected from strong winds, given ideal soil, and pruned again and again to maintain their shape. This old pine has found its own way to be beautiful, even in imperfect conditions, perhaps because of them." Sosin led Daiki to a stone bench facing the tree. "For the next week," he said, "I want you to spend 1 hour each morning simply sitting with this pine. Do not try to fix it. Do not judge it. Do not wish it were different. Just be present with it exactly as it is." Daiki felt disappointed. He had come to learn how to create beauty, not to sit with what he saw as a flaw. But he trusted his teacher. Agreed. The first morning was difficult. Daiki sat reluctantly, his mind full of criticism. The tree looked broken to him, like a symbol of what happens when things are not properly maintained. He spent most of the hour thinking of how the garden would look if this unsightly tree were removed. But as the days passed, something began to shift. On the 3rd morning, Daiki noticed how early light caught the deep grooves of the bark, creating patterns of shadow and glow that were unexpectedly beautiful. On the 4th morning, he saw a small bird nest tucked into one of the twisted branches, using the unusual angles for shelter and support. By the end of the week, Daiki found himself looking forward to his quiet time with the tree. He began to see that its shape was not a failure. It was a masterpiece of adaptation. Every bend and curve was the pine's honest response to the challenges it had faced. No straight tree could tell such a rich story of survival. On the final morning, as Daiki sat in his usual place, Sosin joined him. "What has the tree taught you?" the old master asked. Daiki was quiet for a long moment before he answered. "It has taught me there are different kinds of beauty," he said. "The formal gardens are beautiful like a perfect poem, but this tree is beautiful like a wise face that shows its history. I came here wanting to learn how to make things perfect, but the tree has shown me how to find perfection in things as they are." Sosin nodded slowly. "The tree grows according to its nature and its circumstances," he said. "It does not try to become a different tree. It simply meets each moment with honesty. This is a deep teaching of Zen, not to force ourselves or our world into predetermined shapes, but to recognize the natural perfection that appears when we stop fighting what is. This story reveals another layer of acceptance. We often think acceptance means tolerating what we dislike, but true acceptance goes deeper. It means discovering that what we resist may contain the very wisdom we need. Daiki's journey from criticism to appreciation mirrors our own journey with ourselves. Like the twisted pine, we carry marks from the storms we have endured. We all have parts of our history, our personality, or our life path that do not match our ideal image. Zen teaches that these apparent imperfections are not barriers to awakening. They are often the very material from which awakening grows. Struggle can become strength. Wounds can become compassion. Limits can become doorways to creativity and resourcefulness. The twisted pine survived storms that destroyed straighter trees precisely because it learned to bend. In the same way, our capacity to accept and work with what is imperfect can make us more resilient and more real than those who have never been tested. This changes how we relate to everything in life that seems less than ideal. The difficult relationship that teaches patience, the health challenge that clarifies what matters, the failure that quietly redirects us toward a truer path. When we stop demanding that life conform to our preferences, we become able to receive life as it is and to notice its actual gifts. The practice of deeper acceptance begins with curiosity instead of judgment. When you encounter something in yourself or your circumstances that you want to change, pause first. Ask what it might be teaching you. Ask how it might be shaping you, even if it is not what you would have chosen. This does not mean becoming passive. Sosin still tended his formal gardens with care and skill, but he also honored the wild beauty that arises when nature follows its own wisdom. As you rest now, consider any place in your life where you have been fighting what is, insisting that reality should be different. What would it feel like to meet that place with the flexible strength of the old pine, bending without breaking, responding with quiet honesty? Acceptance is not giving up. It is the ground of genuine transformation. When we stop struggling against reality, we become able to move with it. And in that movement, we discover possibilities we could not see while we were locked in resistance. A young monk named Jiro lived in a monastery, nestled high in the mountains, where the air was thin and crystal clear. Every morning before dawn, he walked down a winding stone path to collect water from a natural spring. The path was narrow and treacherous, with loose rocks underfoot and steep drops along one side. But Jiro had made the journey hundreds of times. One morning, as he carefully made his way down, he noticed something glinting in the early light. Half buried beneath a fallen log was a small, perfectly smooth river stone. But this was no ordinary stone. It seemed to hold a faint glow, as if there were warmth inside it. Across its surface were natural patterns that looked almost like ancient writing. Jiro picked it up, and a gentle heat spread through his hands. He had never felt anything like it. Surely, he thought, this was a sign, a gift meant for him alone. He tucked the stone carefully into his robe and continued on toward the spring. Over the following days, Jiro found himself touching the stone again and again, as if to reassure himself it was still there. During meditation, he would hide it in his palm. While working in the garden, he would check that it was safe inside his robe. At meals, he would feel for its small weight, steady and familiar. The stone began to fill more of his thoughts than he expected. At night, he lay awake wondering where it had come from. Was it truly unusual? Did it carry some hidden power? He started to believe his meditation felt deeper when he held it, that his work went more smoothly when it was near. But as the attachment grew, worry arrived with it. What if he lost it? What if someone noticed it and took it away? Jiro began choosing longer paths to avoid the other monks. He checked his pocket again and again, sometimes without even realizing he was doing it. The very thing that had first brought him wonder now brought him a quiet, constant anxiety. One morning, as Jiro hurried along the mountain path with his water buckets, his foot caught on a loose stone. He stumbled and fell hard, water splashing across the rocks. As he scrambled to gather the buckets, he heard a small sound that stopped his heart, a gentle clink of stone against stone. His precious river stone had slipped from his robe and was rolling toward the cliff edge. Jiro lunged for it, reaching with desperate fingers, but he was too late. The stone tipped over the precipice and disappeared into the misty valley far below. Jiro sat on the path, staring at the place where it had vanished. All his guarding, all his checking, all his careful hiding had meant nothing. In a single moment, what he had held most dear was gone. He expected devastation. Instead, something unexpected moved through him. Relief. The tight worry was gone. The need to protect and check and hide vanished with the stone. For the first time in weeks, his mind felt clear and open, like a window finally lifted. And in that clarity, he saw what had happened. In trying so hard to hold on to the stone, he had lost something far more precious, his peace of mind. As Jiro walked back up the mountain with empty buckets, he felt lighter than he had in months. The stone had been beautiful, but the fear it brought had made his life smaller. Now, with empty pockets and a softer heart, he noticed what had been waiting all along. Morning mist drifting between peaks, the quiet sound of his footsteps on ancient stone, the simple rhythm of breathing mountain air. That evening, Jiro went to his teacher and told him the whole story. The master listened without interruption, nodding slowly, as if he had heard the same pattern many times in many different lives. When Jiro finished, the teacher said, "The stone taught you something precious, but the lesson was not in keeping it. The lesson was in losing it. You discovered that your happiness was never inside the stone. It was in your ability to recognize beauty when you meet it. That ability cannot fall off a cliff. It goes wherever you go." Then the teacher smiled, gentle and clear. We think we must possess what we love, but possession turns love into fear. When you truly love something, you can let it be free, and in that freedom, both you and what you love can rest. This simple story holds one of the most transforming teachings in Buddhist wisdom. We do not suffer because we love. We suffer because we cling. The moment we grasp tightly to anything, an object, a person, an experience, even an idea, we plant the seeds of anxiety. Jiro's stone was not the problem. Beauty is meant to be seen. Joy is meant to be felt. But when appreciation becomes ownership, when joy becomes clinging, the heart tightens and the mind grows restless. The stone brought Jiro happiness when he first found it. That happiness faded the moment he decided he had to keep it forever. This changes how we relate to everything we cherish. Relationships become more loving when we stop trying to control them. Moments become richer when we stop demanding they last. Possessions bring more joy when we hold them lightly, grateful while they are with us, and able to release them when the time comes. The deepest peace comes not from getting what we want and keeping it forever, but from learning to value what is here and to let it move on when it must. This is not coldness. It is a warmer, truer kind of love. a love that does not tighten into fear. And now, let us explore this wisdom further through another story. One that shows how letting go can transform not only our relationship with life, but our relationship with ourselves. Master Aishin was known throughout the region as the most skilled calligrapher in generations. People traveled for days to commission his work. His scrolls were treasured by collectors and temples alike. His brushstrokes seemed to flow from a quiet source beneath thought, forming characters with unusual beauty and strength. Aishin took great pride in his art. He would spend hours preparing ink to the perfect consistency, selecting brushes with just the right flexibility, and waiting for what he believed was the ideal state of mind before beginning an important piece. His studio was arranged with meticulous care, each tool in its proper place. One spring morning, a wealthy merchant commissioned Aishin to create a wedding scroll for his daughter. It was to be a major work, worthy of the generous payment offered, and the merchant requested specific characters, a blessing for enduring happiness, written in Aishin's most elaborate style. Aishin prepared for days. He fasted to clear his mind, meditated to steady his spirit, and practiced the characters again and again on ordinary paper. When he finally felt ready, he laid out his finest silk. He prepared his most precious ink. He chose his most beloved brush. As he began the first character, everything felt perfect. His hand moved with smooth grace. The ink flowed like dark silk. The character emerged with stunning beauty. Aishin's heart filled with quiet satisfaction. This, he thought, would be his masterpiece. Then, as he moved to the second character, a sudden gust of wind slipped through the open window and knocked over his water bowl. Water spilled across the silk, creating a dark stain through the center of the first character, the one he had just completed. Aishin froze. Weeks of preparation seemed ruined in an instant. The silk was rare and expensive. The deadline was close. The merchant expected the scroll within days, and the character he had made with such care now looked destroyed. His first impulse was anger. Anger at the wind, at his own carelessness, at the cruel timing of it all. He considered trying to clean the scroll, but the stain had already entered the fibers. He considered starting over, but he had no other silk of this quality. So he sat, staring at the damaged scroll, feeling his vision of perfection crumble. And then something shifted. He looked again, more closely, and noticed the shape of the stain. It was not only a blot, it was flowing, organic, like a cloud passing over a mountain. It carried its own kind of beauty, unexpected and alive. Slowly, Aishin picked up his brush again. Instead of fighting the accident, he began to work with it. He let the stain become part of the composition, not a mistake to hide, but a form to respond to. Where he had planned strict perfection, he now allowed something freer to appear. He painted the characters around and through the stain, letting his hand move in conversation with what was already there. He stopped trying to control every stroke and allowed his attention to meet each moment as it came. When he finished, he looked down at the scroll and felt a different kind of astonishment. The work had a life and movement his careful, controlled pieces had never held. The stain, which had first seemed like a disaster, had released him from perfectionism and opened a door to his true art. When the merchant saw the finished scroll, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Master Aishin, I have seen many examples of your work, but this is beyond anything you have created before. How did you achieve such spontaneous beauty?" Aishin smiled, remembering his first wave of horror. "I stopped trying to force perfection," he said, "and I allowed life to move through my brush. The stain taught me that my greatest enemy was not imperfection, but my fear of it. When I let go of needing to control every detail, the work became alive. From that day forward, Aishin's art changed. He still practiced, he still prepared, but he no longer tried to trap the future inside a fixed plan. He learned to welcome the unexpected, to respond instead of resist, and to see imperfection as a doorway rather than a failure. This story shows how letting go transforms not only our relationship with objects and circumstances, but our relationship with ourselves. Aishin discovered that his attachment to perfection had been blocking the very beauty he sought. His fear of mistakes had kept him from the natural freedom that appears when we trust life enough to meet what is here. This teaching reaches into every corner of life. How often do we strain ourselves trying to prevent discomfort? How often do we damage a relationship by controlling it too tightly? How often do we lose the simple joy of living because we are trying to make everything come out exactly right? When Aishin stopped battling the stain and began working with it, he discovered possibilities he could not have imagined. Letting go is not passivity. It is the quiet wisdom of releasing the tight grip of fear so that the hands and the heart can respond with skill. Whether a stone remains in our pocket or falls into the valley, whether water spills on our scroll or not, peace becomes possible when we learn to meet life as it arrives. As you rest, notice if there is any place you have been gripping too tightly, any worry about loss, any fear of imperfection that creates tension in the body. Softening that grip does not mean you stop caring. Aishin still loved his art. Jiro still recognized beauty. But when we care without clinging, when we love without possession, something in us can finally breathe. And now, another story. In a small village at the edge of a vast forest lived a baker named Kenji, known for his kind heart and generous spirit. Each morning before dawn, he lit his ovens and prepared fresh bread for the day. The warm smell drifted through the village streets, waking people gently and bringing a quiet comfort. Kenji kept a simple practice. Every day he baked a few extra loaves and placed them on a wooden shelf outside his shop with a small sign that read, "For those who need them." Travelers, struggling families, anyone who was hungry could take what they needed without asking or explaining. One harsh winter, when food was scarce and many villagers were strained and afraid, a group of desperate men began stealing from shops and homes. They came at night, taking whatever they could carry. The village grew tense. Doors were locked. People hid what little they had. Kenji's shop was robbed 3 times in 2 weeks. Each time, the thieves took not only the free bread from the shelf, but also money from his cash box and flour from his stores. The 3rd time, they broke several baking tools and overturned his carefully arranged workspace. The villagers were furious. "You must stop leaving bread outside," they told him. "You are encouraging them. Put bars on your windows. Get a guard dog. Show them you will not be an easy target." But Kenji continued his practice. Each morning, he cleaned what had been damaged, repaired what he could, and baked as usual. He still placed extra loaves on the shelf outside, even as they disappeared faster than ever. One especially cold night, Kenji worked late, preparing dough for the next day. He heard a sound at the front door and saw shadows moving outside. Instead of hiding or calling for help, he opened the door. 3 men stood there, thin with hunger, their faces worn. their clothes torn from living rough in the winter forest. They had come to steal again, but they froze when they saw Kenji looking at them directly. Kenji spoke quietly. "You must be very hungry to be out on a night like this." The men did not know how to answer. They had expected an empty shop and darkness to hide them. They had not expected a human voice, calm and unafraid. "I have soup cooking," Kenji said, "and warm bread just out of the oven. If you would like to eat, you may come in." The oldest man, who seemed to lead the others, narrowed his eyes. "Why would you help us? Do you know who we are?" "We are the ones who have been taken from you," Kenji nodded. "I know, and I can see you take what you need to survive. A man does not steal bread because he is evil. He steals bread because he is hungry." He stepped aside and let the warm light spill into the cold. "This winter is hard," he said, "but it does not have to turn us into enemies." Slowly, cautiously, the three men entered the bakery. Kenji served them bowl after bowl of hot soup and as much bread as they could eat. As their hands warmed and their bodies settled, they began to talk. They had lost their jobs when the local mine closed. No work remained. Their savings disappeared. They had tried begging, but the villagers chased them away. Living in the forest, stealing had begun to feel like the only way to survive. "We never wanted to hurt anyone," the youngest said, his eyes filling with tears. "We just did not want to starve." Kenji listened with full attention, not interrupting, not judging. When they finished eating, he made an offer that left them silent. "I could use help with the early baking," he said. "The work is hard and the hours are long, but there is always food here and a warm place to sleep in the room above the shop. If you are willing to work, you are welcome to stay." The men stared at him. They had come to steal. He was offering them shelter. The oldest man shook his head, almost as if he could not accept what he was hearing. "Why would you trust us? We have robbed you more than once." Kenji looked at him steadily. "Because people do better when they are given a chance to do better," he said. "You stole because you were desperate. But desperation is not who you are. It is only a situation you were in." The men stayed. They worked harder than any helpers Kenji had known, grateful beyond words. Within months, the bakery grew more prosperous than ever. The village became safer, and the men who had been feared in the night became familiar faces in the morning light. Years later, when people asked Kenji why he had chosen kindness instead of punishment, he would say, "Fear creates more fear. Anger creates more anger. But compassion can change what seems unchangeable. When we respond to suffering with understanding instead of judgment, we give everyone the chance to become better than they were." This story reveals something essential about compassion in Buddhist teaching. True compassion is not only being kind when it is easy, it is the courage to see that beneath harmful actions there is often suffering, and to respond to that suffering with wisdom rather than cruelty. Kenji understood what others could not see. The thieves were not evil men who enjoyed causing harm. They were human beings caught in desperate circumstances, acting from hunger and fear, not from malice. When Kenji met their actions with compassion instead of anger, he created the conditions for real change. This is important to understand. Compassion is not weakness, and it is not naivety. It is a steady force that can transform situations that seem impossible. When we meet aggression with more aggression, conflict grows. But when we can see through harmful behavior to the pain beneath it, we open a door to healing for everyone involved. Part of the deep peace in Buddhist teaching comes from this. When we respond to difficulty with compassion, we stop adding our own anger and fear to the suffering of the world. We become a quiet source of calming and repair. This does not mean accepting harmful behavior or placing ourselves in danger. It means recognizing that lasting change comes from addressing the roots of a problem, not only reacting to its symptoms. As this settles, you may feel a small softening in the chest, as if a tight knot is loosening. Now, let us continue with another story, one that shows how compassion toward ourselves can be just as transforming as compassion offered to others. There was once a student named Mickey who came to study at a mountain temple known for its rigorous meditation practice. She had heard that the monks there could sit in stillness for hours, their minds clear as mountain water, their hearts filled with quiet peace. She wanted desperately to reach that same depth. Mickey threw herself into practice with fierce determination. She rose at 3 a.m. to meditate before the other students awakened. She shortened her meals, skipped rest, and pushed herself to sit longer than anyone else, sometimes until her legs went numb and her back ached sharply. But instead of the calm she sought, her mind became more tense and critical than ever. During meditation, rather than watching her thoughts with gentle awareness, she attacked each wandering moment with harsh commands. Focus, she would order herself. Stop being undisciplined. Other students can do this. What is wrong with you? When her mind felt scattered, she punished herself by skipping meals or adding extra hours of sitting. When drowsiness appeared, she scolded herself for being weak. Her inner voice became a constant stream of judgment. After months of this, Mickey felt worse than when she arrived. Her body grew thin. Her mind became exhausted. Her heart felt heavy with shame. One morning, after a difficult sitting where she had criticized herself for every wandering thought, Mickey went to the temple garden to cry when no one would see. She sat beneath a cherry tree, feeling like a failure. Master Yuki, the temple's elderly teacher, happened to walk through the garden. Seeing Mickey's distress, she sat down quietly beside her on a stone bench. "Tell me about your practice," Master Yuki said. Through tears, Mickey poured out everything: the strict schedule, the harsh inner voice, the disappointment that never ended. "I try so hard," she whispered, "but I am not good enough. I will never meditate like the others. Maybe I should give up." Master Yuki listened without interruption. Then she pointed to a small bird that had landed nearby. It pecked at the earth, searching for seeds, moving with simple ease. "Watch that little bird," Master Yuki said. "See how naturally it lives. It does not criticize itself for not finding food fast enough. It does not compare itself to other birds. It simply does what birds do, moment by moment, without hostility toward its own nature." Mickey watched the bird for a while, struck by its quiet presence. Then Master Yuki said, "Imagine if the bird spent its day telling itself it was a terrible bird, that it should fly better or sing more beautifully. What would happen to its ability to live? What would happen to its joy?" Mickey understood immediately. "It would be too busy judging itself to do what it knows how to do," she said. Master Yuki nodded. "You came here to learn compassion and peace," she said. "But the first place to practice them is with yourself. How can you offer kindness to others if your own heart receives only harshness? How can you find stillness if you are at war with your own mind? Her voice stayed warm and steady. The path is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming kind, first to yourself, then to all beings. Your mind will wander in meditation. That is what minds do. The practice is not to crush the wandering. The practice is to notice it and return with the same patience you would offer a beloved child learning to walk. From that day, Mickey changed her approach. Instead of commanding her mind to focus, she gently invited it back to the breath. Instead of attacking thoughts, she simply noticed them, thinking, planning, remembering, and returned with a soft heart. When her body hurt, she adjusted her posture. When she was exhausted, she rested. She treated her physical needs with respect. When emotions rose, she stopped judging them as obstacles and learned to breathe with them as she would sit with a friend in pain. The change was quiet, but real. Within weeks, her meditation became deeper and more peaceful, not because she forced it, but because her mind was no longer being struck by constant criticism. The harsh inner voice began to soften into something gentler, something supportive. Years later, Mickey became known for her compassionate teaching style and her ability to help struggling students find their way to genuine calm. When asked what she had learned, she would say, "The kindness we give ourselves becomes the foundation for the kindness we offer the world." We cannot find peace through war, even when that war is inside our own mind. This story holds one of Buddhism's most essential teachings about compassion. Before we can truly help others or rest in lasting peace, we must learn to treat ourselves with the same understanding we would offer someone we deeply love. Many of us carry an inner critic that is harsher than we would ever be to a friend, and that inner violence blocks our natural clarity. Self-compassion is not self-indulgence. It is the simple recognition that we learn and grow better in an atmosphere of kindness than in an atmosphere of punishment. When we stop fighting our imperfections, the mind settles more easily into the peace that was always beneath the struggle. This changes how we approach growth and practice. Instead of trying to force awakening through harsh discipline, we create the conditions for it through gentle persistence and patient care. Like a garden that flourishes with steady tending, the heart opens when it is treated with compassion. Mickey's suffering did not come from wandering thoughts. It came from the way she met them. When she fought her own mind, she created pain. When she met it with kindness, the same mind began to reveal its natural stillness. There is relief in this. It means you do not have to be perfect to be worthy of peace. You do not have to fix everything before you can rest. As you listen, you may notice how the body responds to the idea of ending the inner war. A softening, a sense of permission. This is not lowering standards. It is recognizing that love is a stronger force for change than fear. When compassion begins inside us, it naturally extends outward. When we stop judging our own struggles, we become more patient with the struggles of others. When we learn to forgive ourselves, we grow a wider capacity to forgive. When we understand our own pain deserves care, we begin to see the same truth in everyone. The deep peace these teachings offer comes from this shift. Instead of fighting problems or shaming ourselves for having them, we learn to meet whatever arises with steady tenderness, like a mother holding a child. In that safety, change happens naturally, not through force, but through love. Let yourself rest in this possibility. Imagine moving through tomorrow with the same kindness Master Yuki offered to Mickey. Notice how that gentleness makes space for wisdom to appear. This is the gift of Buddhist teaching. Not only methods for improvement, but a new way of relating to your own life, one that makes it easier for the mind to feel safe enough to sleep. There once lived a young tea merchant named Taro, who traveled from village to village selling fine teas from distant mountains. His cart was filled with carefully wrapped packages of green tea, black tea, and rare flowering teas that opened like blossoms in hot water. Taro took pride in his knowledge and in his ability to match each customer with a tea that suited their taste. But Taro had a problem. His mind was always somewhere else. While walking through one village, he was thinking about the next village he needed to reach. While speaking with customers, he was calculating profits or worrying about the weather. While eating his evening meal, he was planning the next day's route or replaying conversations from earlier. This constant movement of thought made Taro feel tired and scattered. He would arrive in a new village and realize he barely remembered the road that brought him there. He would finish a conversation and forget the person's name almost immediately. His life began to feel like a blur of motion, without the quiet satisfaction he longed for. One evening, Taro arrived in a mountain village as the sun was setting. He was tired from a long day of travel and eager to find a quiet place to sleep. As he walked through the still streets, pulling his cart, he noticed a small tea house with warm light glowing in its windows. Inside, an elderly woman sat alone at a low table, preparing tea with careful, unhurried movements. Something about her presence drew Taro's attention. She seemed completely absorbed in the simple ceremony, as if nothing else existed beyond this one cup of tea. Taro knocked gently and asked if he might shelter there for the night. The woman, whose name was Sachiko, welcomed him and invited him to sit while she finished preparing the tea. "I am a tea merchant," Taro said, lowering himself onto a cushion. "I carry teas from all over the region. Perhaps you would like to try some of my finest varieties." Sachiko smiled softly and continued her slow, attentive motions. "Thank you for your generous offer," she said. "But first, would you join me in drinking this tea I have already prepared? It is simple green tea, nothing special." Taro agreed, though he was still eager to impress her with the rare packages in his cart. Sachiko poured the tea into small clay cups and placed one in front of him. Then she lifted her own cup and took a slow sip, as if she had all the time in the world. Taro lifted his cup and took a quick drink, already forming comments in his mind. Before he could speak, Sachiko asked quietly, "What did you taste?" The question surprised him. "Well, it is green tea," Taro said. "Decent quality, though I have better varieties in my cart. The leaves could be picked earlier for a more delicate flavor." Sachiko raised a hand gently, not to scold him, but to pause him. "I did not ask you to compare," she said. "I asked what you tasted right now, in your mouth. What do you actually taste?" Taro hesitated. He lifted the cup again and took another sip, trying to focus, but his mind rushed into its familiar habit of judging and evaluating. Sachiko watched him kindly. "Try once more," she said. "This time drink as if you have never tasted tea before, as if this is the first sip of tea in your entire life." It sounded strange, but her calm made him want to try. Taro lifted the cup slowly and took the smallest sip he could. Instead of thinking about the tea, he tried to experience it. For the first time, he noticed the warmth spreading across his tongue. He felt the gentle dryness that followed. He sensed a faint sweetness arriving after the bitterness softened. There was an earthy note that reminded him of mist drifting through mountain trees. Sachiko asked again, "Now, what did you taste?" Taro blinked, surprised by his own answer. "I tasted the tea," he said. Not my thoughts about the tea, but the tea itself. Sachiko nodded, pleased. Many people drink tea their whole lives without ever truly tasting it, she said. They are so busy thinking about the tea, judging it, comparing it, deciding whether they like it, that they miss the direct experience of drinking. She poured him another cup. Try again, she said. And also notice what it feels like to hold the warm cup in your hands. Notice the swallow. Notice the steam rising. Taro spent the next hour drinking tea with a kind of attention he had never known. Each sip became a quiet meditation. His breathing slowed on its own. His racing thoughts settled into simple appreciation for what was happening right here. This is how I learned to find peace, Sachiko told him as the night grew deeper. Not by changing my life, but by arriving fully in it. I have made tea in this simple way for 30 years, and I still discover something new, because I am truly present for it. That night, Taro slept more deeply than he had in months. In the morning, as he prepared to continue his journey, everything felt different. As he loaded his cart, he noticed the weight and texture of each package. As he walked through the village, he heard birdsong he had never paid attention to before. The air felt fresh against his skin, clean and alive. From that day forward, Taro's approach to his work changed. When he spoke with customers, he listened fully instead of planning his next pitch. When he walked from village to village, he noticed the landscape, the feel of his feet on the path, the steady rhythm of breath. This small shift transformed not only his inner life, but his work as well. People began seeking him out because they felt truly heard when they spoke to him. His calm attention helped him understand what each person needed and to match them with a tea that suited their life, not just their taste. Years later, when people asked Taro the secret of his quiet contentment, he would say, "Happiness is not found by looking elsewhere. It is discovered by being fully where you are." This story points to one of Buddhism's most practical teachings, mindfulness, the simple practice of giving full attention to the present moment. Many of us live like Taro once did. The body is in one place, but the mind is always somewhere else. We eat without tasting. We walk without seeing. We speak without truly listening. This divided attention leaves us unsatisfied because we never fully arrive in our own lives. When we are always reaching for the next thing, we miss the richness of what is already here. When attention is scattered across past and future, the mind never gets to rest. Mindfulness is not about forcing the mind to be empty or achieving a special state. It is learning to be present for what is happening now, whether that is drinking tea, having a conversation, or simply breathing. When attention becomes whole, the mind naturally grows quieter. Taro discovered that an ordinary act, drinking tea, could become deeply satisfying when he gave it his full presence. This shows us that peace does not always require new circumstances. Often, it requires a new quality of attention. Let us continue into another story, one that shows how mindfulness can carry us even through the hardest news. Master Josen was known for remaining calm and steady, no matter what happened around him. Students traveled from distant temples to learn from him, hoping to understand the source of his unshakable peace. But Josen's most devoted student, a young monk named Kaku, struggled with doubt. Kaku had lived at the temple for 2 years. Master Josen was wise and kind, yes, but life at the temple was also quiet and predictable. The community was harmonious. Their routines were gentle and steady. Kaku wondered if his teacher's calmness came only from living in such ideal conditions. "Anyone can be peaceful in a place like this," Kaku said one day to a friend. But what would happen if Master Josen faced real trouble? Would he still be calm if his world was shaken? One autumn morning, Kaku received an answer he never expected. A messenger arrived at the temple with terrible news. Bandits had attacked Master Josen's home village during the night. His elderly mother and younger brother had lost their lives, and the family home where Josen had grown up was gone. Kaku watched his teacher closely as he received the message. For a moment, Josen's eyes filled with tears, and his body seemed to sag with grief. Then, instead of running or shouting or collapsing, he sat down on a nearby stone and began to breathe, slowly and steadily, as if he were making room for the truth. "Master," the messenger said urgently, "should you not leave immediately? There may be arrangements to make, ceremonies to plan." Josen nodded gently. "Yes," he said, "I will go. But first I need a few moments to be present with this news and with what is happening inside me." Kaku was astonished. His teacher was facing deep loss, and yet he was not drowning in panic. He was meeting the grief directly, with attention. After several minutes of quiet breathing, Josan stood. "Kaku," he said, "come with me. We will travel to my village together." During the long journey, Kaku expected his teacher to be lost in sorrow or distracted by worry. Instead, he found that Josan was more present and attentive than ever. When they stopped to rest, Josen noticed the changing colors of the autumn leaves. When they met other travelers, he listened to their stories with full attention. When they shared simple meals, he ate with quiet appreciation, as if even this food mattered. "Master," Kaku finally asked, unable to hold back his confusion, "how can you notice such small things when something so terrible has happened? Should you not be too upset to pay attention to anything else?" Josan stopped and looked at his student with eyes that held both deep sadness and a steady peace. "Kaku, this is exactly when mindful attention matters most," he said. "When we are struck by tragedy, the mind often tries to escape the present moment. It runs into thoughts about what we should have done differently, or it races ahead, imagining how the future will be ruined by this loss." He gestured to the forest path beneath their feet. But escaping into stories about past and future does not help anyone. My mother and brother are gone, and no amount of anguish will bring them back. What I can do is honor them by staying fully present for what needs my care right now. Josan picked up a fallen leaf and looked closely at the fine lines in its surface. If I spend this journey lost in regret or worry, I miss the beauty they would have wanted me to see. If I am too distracted by grief to listen to the people we meet, I might miss a chance to help someone who needs it. Then he looked directly at Kaku. Mindfulness is not pretending everything is fine. It is not avoiding difficult emotions. It is being present for all of life, including the painful parts. When I sit with grief mindfully, I can feel it fully without being destroyed by it. When I stay present even in sorrow, I remain available to respond wisely. When they reached the village, Kaku saw his teacher's wisdom in action. Because Josan was present for each conversation and decision, he was able to comfort other grieving families, arrange meaningful ceremonies, and handle practical matters with clarity and compassion. His steady attention allowed him to be genuinely helpful when many people would have been overwhelmed. That evening, as they sat by the graves of his mother and brother, Josen wept quietly. Yet even his tears seemed different. They came naturally, without bitter fighting, without desperate grasping. He was present with sorrow, but not consumed by it. "Now I understand," Kaku said softly. "You are not peaceful because you have no problems. You are peaceful because you know how to be present with whatever arises." Josen nodded. Mindfulness does not make difficulties disappear, he said, but it prevents us from making them worse by fighting reality or running from it. When we can stay present even with pain, we discover we are stronger than we imagined. This story shows that mindfulness is not only for easy days. It matters most when life is difficult, because it keeps us from adding extra turmoil to what already hurts. Jozan's response also shows that presence does not mean being emotionless. He felt grief fully, but he did not get lost inside it. This is the middle way Buddhism points to, neither suppressing emotions nor drowning in them. When we face loss, disappointment, or crisis, the mind often adds suffering by spinning endless stories. Stories of unfairness, stories of hopelessness, stories that say we will never recover. These mental additions can become heavier than the original pain. Mindful presence offers another way. Instead of pushing sadness away or being swept away by it, we learn to stay with it. We breathe with it. We allow it to move through the body without turning it into a lifetime of fear. This brings relief because it means we do not have to wait for life to become problem-free before we can find peace. We can learn to be steady even in the middle of challenge by meeting what is actually here instead of getting trapped in our stories about it. Buddhist teaching recognizes that difficulty is part of life, but it also teaches that much of our suffering comes from resisting the reality of the present moment. When we learn to meet each moment with gentle attention, even hard moments become workable. We stop wasting energy fighting what is already here, and we can use that energy to respond with wisdom and care. As you rest in this understanding, notice how presence creates a feeling of groundedness. Even if life holds uncertainty, this moment right now is manageable. You can breathe with whatever is here. You can be present for your own life, not as you wish it were, but as it is. This is the gift of mindfulness, not the promise that life will always be comfortable, but the discovery that you can meet any moment with awareness and grace. When we learn to rest in the present, we find the deep peace these teachings have pointed toward all along. Deep in the mountains, there lived a scholar named Hayato, who had devoted his life to studying Buddhist philosophy. His small house was packed from floor to ceiling with ancient texts, commentaries, and volumes from many different traditions. He could recite complex arguments from memory and explain subtle points of doctrine with impressive precision. Hayato spent his days reading, taking notes, and writing his own commentaries. Over time, he became known as one of the most learned Buddhist scholars in the region. Students sometimes made the long journey to his mountain retreat to study with him, hoping to benefit from his knowledge. But despite all his learning, Hayato felt something was missing. His understanding was complete in theory, yet when faced with daily problems or difficult emotions, that knowledge often offered little comfort. He could explain suffering in elaborate detail, but he still suffered. He could describe the path perfectly, but he felt far from its peace. One winter morning, an old woman appeared at his door. She was bent with age, dressed in simple clothes, carrying a small bundle of vegetables. She looked like an ordinary village farmer. "Excuse me, sir," she said in a humble voice. "I have been walking all night through the snow. I am cold and tired. May I sit by your fire for a while to warm myself?" Hayato felt annoyed by the interruption, but his training reminded him of compassion. He allowed her in, and she sat by the hearth, warming her hands. As she looked around, she noticed books covering nearly every surface. "My," she said with gentle amazement, "you must be very wise to have read so many books about Buddhism." Hayato felt pride rise in his chest. "Yes," he said, I have studied Buddhist philosophy for over 30 years. I know the teachings of the great masters. There is probably no question about doctrine that I cannot answer." The old woman smiled as if impressed. "How wonderful," she said. "I am only a simple farmer, but I've always wondered about something. Perhaps you could help me understand." "Of course," Hayato said, pleased to demonstrate his knowledge. The woman grew quiet for a moment, gazing into the fire. Then she asked very simply, "What is Buddha?" Hayato began a long explanation. He spoke of the historical Buddha, of Buddha nature, of the different ways teachings describe Buddhahood. He quoted texts and cited masters. He spoke for nearly an hour, offering everything he knew. When he finished, he looked at the old woman, expecting amazement, but she only looked confused. "I am sorry," she said gently. "I still do not understand. You have told me many things about Buddha, but you have not told me what Buddha is." Hayato felt irritation flash. "I just explained it in great detail," he said. "Perhaps you were not listening carefully. Buddha is the awakened one, the teacher who showed the path to liberation. Rom, suffering." "Yes," the old woman said softly. "But what is Buddha? Not what Buddha did, not what Buddha teaches. What is Buddha?" Hayato tried again, using different words, different angles, different arguments. But no matter how he explained, she returned to the same simple question. "But what is Buddha?" After hours of growing frustration, Hayato finally snapped. "Old woman, if you cannot understand such basic concepts, you should return to farming and leave philosophy to those who can grasp it." The old woman looked at him, and something in her gaze changed. Her eyes seemed suddenly deeper, calmer, almost luminous. "My dear scholar," she said quietly, "you have spent 30 years learning about Buddha, but you have never met Buddha. You can describe Buddha, but you do not know what Buddha is." Hayato fell silent. She stood, gathered her small bundle, and continued in a voice that was kind, not cruel. "True understanding is not found in books alone. It is found in direct experience. You know what others have said about Buddha, but you have not looked inside yourself to find the Buddha nature that lives there." As she walked to the door, she turned back with a gentle smile. "I am only a simple farmer. I cannot read your books or explain your philosophies. But when I work in my garden, I know Buddha. When I sit quietly in the evening, I meet Buddha. When I help a neighbor or feed a hungry animal, Buddha is there. I may not know about Buddha, but I know Buddha." And with that, she stepped out into the snowy morning, leaving Hayato alone among his thousands of books, feeling a strange emptiness where pride had been. For days afterward, he could not concentrate. Her question echoed through his mind. What is Buddha? He realized that despite all his learning, he could not answer from direct experience. He knew what others had written, but he had not truly encountered it in himself. That meeting changed Hayato. He did not abandon his books, but he began to balance study with simple practice. He sat in quiet meditation each day. He started paying attention to ordinary moments the way the old woman described, looking for Buddha in daily life, not only in written arguments. Gradually, his understanding shifted. It moved from his head into his heart. His knowledge became wisdom, not because he collected more information, but because he began to live what he had always known in words. This story reveals one of Buddhism's most important distinctions, the difference between intellectual knowledge and lived wisdom. We can study teachings for years and become skilled at explaining them, yet still feel far from peace. True understanding grows when we stop only collecting ideas about truth and begin to experience truth directly through awareness, through presence, through life itself. The woman in this story represents a simple, direct kind of wisdom that Buddhist teachings point toward. She might not have been able to give lectures about Buddha nature, but she knew it through her own experience. Her understanding was living and present, not abstract. This matters even more in our modern world, where spiritual information is endless. We can read thousands of books, watch countless videos, and collect advice from everywhere. But knowledge alone does not bring the deep peace these teachings promise. Peace comes when what we study becomes something we actually live. The Buddhist path is not about becoming smarter about spirituality. It is about becoming more awake to what is already here in each moment. When we try to think our way into peace, we often move farther from the direct experience that would actually settle the heart. Notice the difference between thinking about breathing and simply feeling the breath. That quiet difference is close to what the old woman was offering. Truth is not only something we explain, it is something we meet with our whole being. Now, let us explore this further through another story. One that shows how wisdom often comes not from having all the answers, but from asking the right questions. There was once a monastery where the monks were known for their intense debates about Buddhist philosophy. Every evening, after their work was finished, they gathered in the main hall and argued about the nature of reality, the meaning of the teachings, and the interpretation of ancient texts. A young monk named Goro loved these debates. He was quick-witted and well-read, and he took pride in winning arguments. He spent his days preparing clever points and studying obscure passages so he could impress everyone at night. One day, a new monk arrived. His name was Tekken, and he seemed different from the others. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with weathered hands and a quiet manner that suggested years of hard work rather than scholarly study. During the evening debates, Tekken sat silently in the back, listening carefully, but never speaking. This puzzled Goro. How could anyone sit through such discussions without wanting to contribute? After a week, during a heated debate about emptiness, Goro turned to the newcomer. "Brother Tekken," he said, "you have listened all week without saying a word. Surely you have an opinion about whether phenomena are empty of inherent existence." All eyes turned to Tekken. He looked slightly uncomfortable, then said quietly, "I am sorry, but I do not really understand what you mean by inherent existence. Could you explain it to me?" Goro was delighted. Here was a chance to display his knowledge. He launched into a detailed explanation, using technical terms and quoting famous masters. When he finished, Tekken nodded slowly. "Thank you," Tekken said, "but I am still not sure I understand. Could you give me an example of something that has inherent existence and something that does not?" Goro happily continued. He offered examples, definitions, and more elaborate reasoning. But when he finished, Tekken asked another simple question, and then another. Evening after evening, the pattern repeated. Tekken asked innocent questions that made him seem uneducated, and Goro responded with increasingly complex explanations. The other monks began to think Tekken was simple, unable to grasp the refined ideas they debated so confidently. Yet something strange began to happen. As Goro tried to explain these teachings to someone who asked basic questions, he had to examine his own understanding more carefully. Tekken's questions forced him to notice where his words were clear and where they were only habit. Then one evening, Tekken asked a question that stopped Goro completely. "Brother Goro," he said, "you have explained emptiness to me many times, and I am grateful. But I wonder, when you are not explaining emptiness, when you are simply living your daily life, How does this understanding change the way you wash dishes or sweep the floor? Goro opened his mouth, then closed it. He realized that despite all his elegant explanations, emptiness had not changed the way he experienced ordinary moments. It remained an idea in his mind, separate from his life. "I am not sure," Goro admitted, embarrassed in a way he had never felt in those debates. Tekken smiled gently. "Thank you for your honesty," he said. "I spent 40 years as a farmer before coming here. I never learned the proper names for Buddhist concepts. I cannot debate. But when I plant seeds in empty soil, I experience something that might be what you call emptiness. When I watch crops grow in dependence on sun, rain, and earth, I see what you call dependent origination." He looked around the hall, calm and sincere. "I came here hoping to learn the names for what I had already tasted in daily work, but maybe the names are not the most important thing. Maybe the experience is what matters." The room fell quiet. For the first time, many monks wondered whether their debates were bringing them closer to wisdom, or only giving them sharper words. Tekken continued, "I am not saying study is worthless. I am grateful for every explanation. But sometimes we get so interested in talking about truth that we forget to live it." From that night on, the evening gatherings slowly changed. Instead of competing to win arguments, the monks began asking how understanding could shape the way they lived. Instead of showing off knowledge, they shared what they were actually learning in their days. Goro discovered that Tekken's simple questions were more valuable than all his clever points. They helped him turn knowledge into something real. This story shows a crucial measure of Buddhist wisdom. True understanding is not how much we know or how well we can explain. It is how deeply our understanding transforms the way we live. Tekken did not chase information. He wanted to connect words to direct experience. He did not try to impress anyone. He wanted to learn how to meet life with more clarity and compassion. This brings relief. It means you do not need to become a scholar to benefit from these teachings. You do not need perfect concepts. You only need to take whatever understanding you have and apply it gently to your daily life. Often, the deepest teachings are simple, like the old woman who knew Buddha through ordinary moments, like Tekken, who understood emptiness through farming. Wisdom appears in common activities when we meet them with real attention. Now, let us continue with another story, one that shows how freedom grows when we stop gripping so tightly. A fisherman named Ichiro lived in a small coastal village where his family had fished the same waters for generations. He owned a beautiful boat built by his grandfather's hands, with carved wooden details and a sail that caught the wind perfectly. The boat was not only his livelihood, it was his pride. He polished its wood, mended its nets, and kept everything in perfect condition. Ichiro became known as the most successful fisherman in the village. His nets found the richest schools, and his sense of the ocean seemed unmatched. But something changed. Ichiro grew so attached to his boat and his success that fishing stopped being joyful. Each morning he woke worried about the weather, anxious about the catch, fearful that something might damage his boat. The night before a trip, he checked and rechecked his equipment, unable to rest. Out on the water, his mind stayed tense. He compared himself to other fishermen. He pushed too hard when fish were biting and felt bitter when they were not. He was always protecting, always calculating. One morning, Ichiro discovered his boat had been stolen during the night. The rope had been cut, and the sea held only an empty space where his boat should have been. He sat on the dock, staring, feeling as if his identity had vanished with it. The villagers offered help, but most boats were too small to take an extra man. Only an old fisherman named Saburo offered to bring Ichiro along. Saburo's boat was tiny and patched, held together by rope and careful habit. His nets were old, mended so many times, they looked like more patch than original thread. Ichiro had always looked down on Saburo's equipment and modest catches, but he had no other choice. As they paddled out, Ichiro felt anxious and embarrassed. How could he fish with a boat like this? What if others saw him? But once they reached the fishing grounds, something unexpected happened. Without his perfect boat and equipment to protect, Ichiro began noticing things he had ignored for years. He watched how Saburo read the water through simple, quiet observation. The old man would sit still for long moments, listening to the waves and feeling the current. When he cast his patched nets, he did so without urgency and without fear. If the nets came up empty, he simply tried another spot. If they came up full, he smiled and continued. "Saburo," Ichiro asked, "are you not worried your nets will tear? They look as if they could fall apart at any moment." Saburo chuckled softly. "They might," he said. "They have torn many times before. I mend them. If they tear today, I mend them tonight. If they fall apart completely, I make new ones. The fish do not care how pretty the nets are." As the day went on, Ichiro felt himself relaxing. Without the burden of guarding his possessions, he could focus on fishing itself. He remembered why he had loved the water as a child, before fishing became a test of reputation. To his amazement, they caught more fish that day than he had caught in weeks. But more important than the fish was the feeling. He was present. He was calm. He was not trapped in fear. "How is this happening?" Ichiro asked. "Your equipment is so simple, and yet we are doing so well." Saburo smiled as he hauled in another net. "Maybe because I am not afraid of losing anything," he said. "My boat is already worn, so I do not fear scratching it. My nets are already patched, so I do not fear tearing them. When you are not protecting everything, you can give your full attention to what you are doing." That evening, Ichiro realized the loss of his boat had freed him from something he did not even know was holding him. His attachment to perfect equipment had been stealing the natural ease that made him a good fisherman. In the weeks that followed, while waiting to see if the boat would be recovered, Ichiro kept fishing with Saburo. Each day showed him how fear of loss had made him tense, and how that tension had reduced his skill. When his boat was eventually found and returned, Ichiro faced a choice. He could return to his old way, with anxiety and constant protection, or he could keep what he owned, but live with a freer heart. He kept the boat, but changed his attitude. He still cared for his equipment, but he no longer lived in fear of losing it. He still worked to catch fish, but he stopped letting success or failure decide whether he could rest. He learned the difference between caring for something and being ruled by it. Years later, when young fishermen asked him for advice, Ichiro would say, "Take good care of your tools, but do not let your tools control you. Love your work, but do not let your work become your master. The best fishing happens when you are not afraid of coming home empty-handed." This story points to a liberating insight about attachment. We often think love means holding tightly, but tight holding turns love into fear. True love has room for freedom. Non-attachment does not mean indifference. Saburo cared deeply about fishing. He simply was not enslaved by outcomes. We can still have preferences. We can still make effort. But when we hold everything lightly, we become more present, and peace becomes easier to find. Now, let us explore an even subtler form of attachment, the attachment to identity. Master Rhiannon was widely regarded as one of the most beautiful and accomplished women of her generation. Born into a noble family, she received the finest education and mastered poetry, calligraphy, music, and dance. Many wealthy men sought her hand in marriage, but Rhiannon felt called to a spiritual life. Despite her family's objections, she chose to become a Buddhist nun. She approached several monasteries, but none would accept her. The abbots took one look at her beauty and refused. "Your appearance would be too distracting," they told her. "You should marry and live a conventional life. The monastic path is not suitable for you." Rhiannon was determined, but she began see that beauty had become a kind of cage for others and for herself. In a moment of desperate resolve, she permanently scarred her face with fire. The pain was real, but what changed even more was the way people looked at her. She was no longer treated as a prized object to be protected and displayed. She became simply a woman seeking truth. When she appeared at another monastery with her scarred face, the abbot accepted her immediately. Her willingness to sacrifice what the world prized in her seemed to them like proof of commitment. In the years that followed, Rhiannon became known not for appearance, but for wisdom and compassion. She wrote poetry that carried deep insight, and her teaching helped many students find freedom. Students sometimes asked if she regretted what she had done. Rhiannon would smile and say, "I destroyed nothing. I only freed myself from the prison of others' expectations and from my own grip on them. The beauty that mattered was always within." But near the end of her life, an even deeper understanding ripened. A young nun approached her and said, "Master, I admire your sacrifice, but I cannot imagine being brave enough to do what you did. How did you find such courage?" Rhiannon looked at her with gentle honesty. "I did not do it out of courage," she said. "I did it out of attachment. I was so attached to becoming a nun that I was willing to sacrifice anything to reach that identity." The young nun looked confused. "But is dedication to practice not a good thing?" "Dedication, yes," Rhiannon said, "but not attachment. When I scarred my face, I thought I was showing devotion, but I was also clinging to a particular role, the idea of who I needed to be. I traded one attachment for another." She paused, watching the garden where flowers bloomed and faded in their season. True freedom does not come only from changing circumstances. It comes from loosening our grip on identity itself, even spiritual identity. The Buddha I sought as a nun was the same Buddha that was present when I lived in my father's house. I simply could not see it then. "So was your sacrifice meaningless?" the student asked. Rhiannon smiled. "No," she said. "It was necessary for me at that time. Sometimes we go to extremes to learn what moderation truly is. My scarred face taught me what books could not. Freedom does not come from changing what we look like or what role we play. It comes from changing how tightly we hold these things." This story reveals several layers of teaching about attachment and identity. At first, attachment to beauty and the world's fascination with it blocked Rhiannon's path. Later, attachment to a spiritual identity pushed her into an extreme act. And finally, maturity revealed a deeper truth. Freedom is not dependent on any particular condition. It depends on the looseness of our grip. We can be admired or overlooked, successful or ordinary, healthy or struggling, and still touch the same liberation when we stop believing these conditions are who we are. This is especially relevant in a culture that constantly tells us to define ourselves by appearance, achievements, possessions, and roles. These identities may be useful in daily life, but they are not our true nature. The peace in this teaching is immense. It means well-being does not depend on maintaining any one condition. We do not have to stay young, successful, strong, or praised in order to be fundamentally okay. And it also points to the final subtlety of non-attachment. Even spiritual effort can become bondage if we cling to outcomes and titles. The goal is not to become perfect. The goal is to recognize the freedom that is already present, regardless of what changes. We can still practice, we can still grow, but we can do it with open hands. When we hold life lightly while caring deeply, we find the deep peace these teachings return to again and again. This is the sanctuary these ancient teachings offer, a place of rest that no outer change can disturb, because it does not depend on anything outside at all. In the mountains above a small village lived a woodcutter named Dai. He had spent his entire life cutting and selling firewood. Every morning he climbed steep forest paths, chose the right trees, and spent the day cutting and splitting wood. Every evening he returned home tired, satisfied, and simple in his mind. Dai had always thought of himself as only a woodcutter, nothing more. He was not educated like the village scholars, not wealthy like the merchants, not artistic like the craftsmen. When people asked what he did, he would shrug and say, "I cut wood. That is all I know." One day, while working deep in the forest, Dai heard unfamiliar voices and the sound of worry coming from a nearby grove. He followed the sound and found a group of monks who had become lost while traveling between monasteries. They sat beside a small stream, looking unsettled and unsure. Their leader, an elderly abbot, approached Dai with respect. "Excuse me, friend," the abbot said. "We have been walking for 2 days and cannot find our way back to the main path. Do you know these mountains?" Dai nodded. "I have walked these trails for 40 years, he said. "I know every bend of the river and every ridge of this forest." The abbot's face softened with relief. "Could you guide us back to the road that leads to Zen Temple? We would be deeply grateful." Dai agreed at once, even though it meant leaving his work for the day. He led 15 monks through paths that seemed unmarked to them, but were as familiar to him as the rooms of his own home. As they walked, the monks watched in amazement. "How do you know this way leads to the road?" one monk asked, as Dai guided them through what looked like dense, pathless woods. Dai pointed to the trees. "I can tell by the moss," he said. "It grows thicker on the north side, and I know the road runs east to west through this valley. I can also hear the river that follows the road." The monks listened, but heard only forest sounds. Still, they trusted him. And as they continued, the trees opened to a river. Not long after, they reached the main road. As they walked, Dai shared knowledge as naturally as breathing. He pointed out which plants could be eaten safely, which could help a minor cut, where the cleanest water could be found, and how to read weather signs in wind and sky. "You know so much about living with nature," a young monk said with admiration. "Did you study these things in books?" Dai laughed. "I cannot read books," he said. "I just pay attention. When you spend enough time with trees and streams, they teach you what you need." When they reached the road that would carry the monks safely onward, the abbot took Dai's hands. "My friend," he said, "you have saved us from a difficult situation. How can we repay your kindness?" "No payment is needed," Dai replied. "I was glad to help." But the abbot did not let go of his hands. "You say you are only a woodcutter," he said, "but today you have been our teacher. You showed us wisdom that none of our books contain. You helped strangers without expecting anything. You guided us with patience." The abbot looked directly into Dai's eyes. Tell me, what makes someone a teacher? Is it reading many books, or is it learning from life and sharing that learning when it is needed? Dai was quiet, thinking. I suppose, he said slowly, it is sharing what you know to help others. And what makes someone wise, the abbot continued, is it knowing complicated ideas, or is it understanding how to live well and peacefully? Dai thought again. Maybe wisdom is knowing how to work with life instead of fighting it. The abbot smiled. Then you are both a teacher and a wise man, whether you call yourself these things or not. As the monks continued their journey, Dai walked back into the forest more slowly than before. For 40 years he had seen himself as only a woodcutter, but those monks had seen him as a guide. That night, sitting by his small fire eating a simple meal, Dai realized how tightly he had narrowed his own life with a single label. He had believed a woodcutter must be less valuable than a scholar or monk. Yet the abbot had helped him see that knowledge and compassion can grow in any life. Over the following weeks, Dai began to notice what had been there all along. When neighbors came for practical advice, he saw that he was teaching. When travelers lost their way, he saw that he was guiding. When he worked with the rhythm of the forest, he saw that his days held a kind of quiet meditation. Nothing about his daily work changed, but his understanding of himself widened. He was still a woodcutter, and he was also more than that. Years later, when people asked Dai about identity, he would say, I used to think I was only a woodcutter. Then I learned I was also a teacher and a guide. And in time I saw that all these names are like clothes. Under them I am simply someone who tries to be helpful and pay attention. That is enough. This story points to one of Buddhism's deepest teachings about self and identity. We often suffer because we accept narrow definitions of who we are. But these identities are not fixed truths. They are stories we repeat, and we can learn to see beyond them. Dai did not need a new job or a grand achievement. He only needed to release the word only. This matters because many people quietly live with the thought, I am only this, only a worker, only a parent, only an ordinary person. Zen reminds us there is no such thing as only. Any role, lived with attention and care, becomes a path for wisdom and compassion. The truth Dai discover is that our deepest identity is not a title. It is the ability to pay attention, to learn from experience, and to help when help is needed. Now, another story, one that shows how our true nature can be hidden, not by circumstances, but by mistaken ideas about what makes someone valuable. There was once a monastery that took in orphan children and raised them as part of the community. One of these children, a boy named Kodo, had been found as an infant with no knowledge of his family or background. The monks raised him with kindness, but as Kodo grew, he always felt slightly apart. Unlike the monks, he had not chosen the spiritual path. He had simply ended up here. He was not officially a monk because he had never taken vows, but he was not a village boy either, because the monastery was the only home he knew. He helped with daily work and joined the rhythm of temple life, yet inside he often felt like someone without a place. As Kodo became a young man, the feeling hardened. He watched formal ceremonies and felt like an outsider. He saw village families during festivals and felt a quiet envy for their clear bonds. He began to think of himself as nobody special, someone who existed without purpose. One day, a famous master from the capital came to visit. Master Sogen was known for wisdom and for seeing clearly into the heart of anyone he met. The local monks prepared their finest ceremonies to honor him. During the visit, Each monk was invited to meet the master privately. Kodo assumed he would not be included, since he was not officially a monk. But to his surprise, he was called in like everyone else. Kodo entered nervously and bowed. Master Sojin sat in the simple room, calm and ordinary. "Please sit," the master said kindly. "Tell me about yourself." "There is not much to tell," Kodo said. "I am not really anybody. I was left here as a baby. The monks let me stay. I help with daily work, but I have no special skill or purpose. I am just here." Master Soyen Lise tended carefully, then asked, "Who told you that you are nobody special?" Kodo blinked. "Nobody said it directly," he answered. "I just know it is true. I have no family name. I have not taken vows. I have achieved nothing important. I am only an orphan at a monastery." "So," Master Sojin said gently, "who told you that having parents makes someone special? Who decided that vows or achievements determine a person's value?" Kodo had never considered those questions. "I suppose I assumed those things mattered," he admitted. Master Soyen nodded. "Let me tell you what I see," he said. "I see someone shaped by a life of practice from the beginning. Someone who has learned simplicity and service without craving recognition. Many people come to practice later, after the mind has been filled with restless wanting. You have lived close to the essence from the start, even if you did not call it that." Kodo felt confused. "But I have not had great realizations," he said. "I have never felt enlightened." "And how do you know what enlightenment looks like?" Master Soyen asked. "Do you think it must come with dramatic visions? Do you think it must make you feel important?" Kodo hesitated. "I thought it would feel different," he admitted. "I thought awakened people would feel special." Master Sojin smiled, almost amused. "My friend, you have been searching as if awakening were an extraordinary state. But what if it is the complete acceptance of being ordinary? What if wisdom is not becoming special, but seeing that life is already complete as it is?" He gestured toward the window, where monks moved through daily tasks. They are sweeping, cooking, gardening. Is their Buddha nature only present when they sit in meditation? Or is it here too, in ordinary work? Kodo watched the familiar scene with new eyes. "The Buddha nature you are seeking," Master Soyen said, "is not hidden inside you, waiting for a grand achievement. It is what has been looking through your eyes this whole time. It is present in every moment of kindness, every act of service, every simple attention to daily work." Then the master placed a gentle hand on Kodo's shoulder. "You came telling me you are nobody special. In one sense, you are right. You are not special in the way the ego wants to be special. But this ordinariness you feel disappointed by is actually a gift. You have lived without the heavy burden of trying to become someone important. Because of that, you have remained closer to who you truly are." That evening, Kodo did the same chores he always did, helping with dinner, cleaning, carrying water. Yet everything felt different. Not because his life had changed, but because he was no longer waiting for something better to arrive. He saw that the searching had been the only thing hiding what was already present. This story points to a deep teaching about true nature. We often believe we must become someone impressive, achieve something great, or have dramatic spiritual experiences to be worthy and complete. Yet Zen points the other way. Our true nature is already here, not as something extraordinary, but as the ordinary awareness that experiences daily life. When we stop trying to become someone else, we discover we were never lacking what mattered most. This brings relief. It means you do not have to earn your worth through accomplishments, titles, or even spiritual attainment. The awareness that sees and hears, the simple consciousness that experiences this moment, is already complete. The path is not forcing enlightenment into existence. It is recognizing what has been here all along. Now, another story, one that teaches impermanence, not as sadness, but as the source of tenderness and appreciation. There once lived a master gardener named Yuki, famous for creating the most beautiful gardens in the region. Her specialty was cherry trees. People traveled from far away just to walk her paths during the brief season of blossoms. Yuki had spent 40 years refining her art. She knew which cherry varieties would bloom in sequence, creating waves of color that lasted for weeks. She shaped the trees so blossoms framed mountain views. She laid stone paths that guided visitors to each tree at the perfect angle. But something troubled her deeply. Every year, just as her garden reached its peak beauty, the blossoms began to fall. Within days, the magnificent display was gone, replaced by green leaves. The fleeting nature of the flowers filled Yuki with sadness. Why must something so beautiful last so briefly, she would think, sweeping petals from the paths. She began experimenting. Different fertilizers, shelters against wind and rain, even strange methods to preserve blossoms. Nothing worked. The trees followed their own rhythm, blooming and falling regardless of her efforts. One spring morning, as Yuki swept another pile of fallen petals, an old monk appeared on the path. He walked slowly, stopping often to look at the trees, even though most blossoms had already fallen. "Excuse me," Yuki called to him. "You have come too late. The peak bloom was last week. There is not much left to see now." The monk looked surprised. "Too late," he said. "I see many beautiful things right now." He pointed to a branch where a few blossoms still clung beside fresh new leaves. "Look," he said, "old blossoms saying goodbye while new life begins." Yuki looked, but she saw only what was missing. "But you should have seen it last week," she insisted. "That was when it was truly magnificent." The monk sat on a stone bench beneath a nearly bare tree. "Tell me about that day," he said. Yuki's face brightened as she described it. Trees covered in pale pink and white, the air filled with fragrance. Visitors walking in wonder, some with tears in their eyes. "It was like paradise," she said. "It sounds wonderful," the monk replied. "And how did you feel during that perfect day?" Yuki paused. "I felt anxious," she admitted. "Even while people praised the beauty, I worried how long it would last. I looked for signs the petals were beginning to fall. I could not fully enjoy it because I was already dreading its end." The monk nodded. "And how do you feel now, a week later?" "Sad," Yuki said. "Empty. Like the year of work was wasted because the beauty was so brief." The monk watched a few petals drift down. "What if the shortness of the bloom is not the enemy of beauty?" he asked, "but the source of it?" Yuki looked confused. "Tell me," the monk said, "would people travel so far to see cherry blossoms if they bloomed all year? Would anyone weep at the sight of them if they lasted for months? Would you treasure the full bloom if it was always available?" Yuki had never thought of it that way. "I suppose not," she said. The monk smiled. "The very thing that makes you sad is what makes the blossoms precious. Their beauty cannot be separated from their impermanence. When people look at cherry blossoms, they are not only seeing flowers, they are touching the truth that all things pass, and that knowledge makes the beauty more meaningful." He gestured toward the trees. "This garden will give you new gifts. Soon it will offer green shade. In autumn it will offer bright leaves. In winter it will offer the clean elegance of bare branches. Each season has its own beauty, because each season knows how to let go. As they sat together, Yuki began to see the garden differently. The fallen petals were not only debris, they were evidence that beauty had been fully expressed and completed. The new leaves were not a replacement. They were the next movement in the tree's life. Yuki realized she had been fighting the very rhythm that made her garden powerful. She had wanted to stop time at the moment of peak beauty, not seeing that this would weaken the meaning of the bloom. The monk stood to continue his walk. Cherry blossoms have been teaching this truth for centuries, he said. Because things pass, each moment is irreplaceable. Because beauty is temporary, it deserves full attention. When we truly understand impermanence, we do not love less, we love more fully. From that day on, Yuki's relationship with her garden changed. She still tended the trees with care, but she no longer fought the cycle of flowering and falling. During peak bloom, she sat quietly among the trees and received their beauty without worry. When petals began to fall, she did not call it loss. She saw it as completion and as space opening for what would come next. Visitors noticed the change. Yuki seemed calmer, more present. The garden itself felt more beautiful, not because the flowers lasted longer, but because the gardener had learned to love them exactly as they were, temporary and perfect. This is one of Buddhism's most profound teachings about impermanence. We often believe we would be happier if beautiful moments could last forever. Yet it is their passing that gives them weight and tenderness. When we accept impermanence, we stop wasting energy trying to freeze life, and we learn to be fully here while a moment is here. This understanding does not make life bleak. It makes it vivid. Now, one more story, one that shows how knowing life is temporary can make the heart more awake, not less. In a mountain village lived an old doctor named Kenji, who had spent his life caring for the people around him. He had delivered babies, treated illness, and comforted families through loss. Now, in his 70s, Dr. Kenji developed a serious illness of his own. He understood that his time was limited. Many expected him to become bitter or depressed. It seemed unfair that a man who had healed others should face something that could not be cured. But something surprising happened. Dr. Kenji began to come alive in a way his friends had never seen. Each morning he sat by the window and looked at the mountains as if seeing them for the first time. He ate simple meals with slow appreciation, noticing taste and texture as if they were gifts. When neighbors visited, he listened with complete attention, as if each conversation mattered more than anything else. He also began doing what he had always said he did not have time for. He painted watercolors of mountain views. He wrote long letters to friends he had not contacted in years. He sat with children, telling stories and listening to their worries and dreams. His assistant, a young nurse named May, could not understand the change. One afternoon, as Dr. Kenji painted a single flower in a small vase, May finally asked him, "Doctor, forgive me, but you seem happier now than I have ever seen you, even though you are facing something so difficult. How is that possible?" Dr. Kenji set down his brush and smiled. "May," he said, "do you know what I discovered when I learned my time was limited?" "What?" she asked softly. "I discovered I had been living as if time would never end," he said, "as if I could always postpone what mattered. I told myself I would call old friends next month. I rushed through meals, thinking I would enjoy life later when I was less busy. I noticed sunsets, but rarely stopped to receive them, believing there would always be another." He touched the flower he had been painting. But when you know time is precious, everything becomes precious. This flower will fade in a few days, so I paint it now with full attention, as if it matters because it does. He walked to the window and looked out at the mountains. I have seen those peaks for 40 years, he said, but most days my mind was elsewhere. Now, each time I see them, it feels like a quiet miracle. May began to understand. You mean accepting impermanence makes life more meaningful? Dr. Kenji nodded. Most people know, in theory, that life is temporary, he said, but they live as if they have endless time. When you truly accept that moments do not return, you stop postponing your life. You arrive in it. He returned to his painting. I am not joyful because my time is limited, he said. I am joyful because I am finally living. I am here for the days I have, instead of always reaching past them. Over the following weeks, May watched him continue in that same steady presence. He did not waste energy on regret or self-pity. He poured attention into whatever was in front of him, a conversation, a meal, the movement of clouds. When his condition worsened and he became confined to bed, his way of being did not change. He listened to the sounds outside his window, birdsong and wind in the trees, as if they were quiet music. When visitors came, he looked into their eyes with full attention, making each person feel seen and received. On his final day, Dr. Kenji asked May to come to his bedside. I want to thank you for caring for me these past months, he said, and I want to leave you with one last thing. What is it, Doctor? May asked softly. Do not wait until you are dying to start really living, he said. You do not need a diagnosis to remember that time is precious. Each day that passes is gone forever, not as something frightening, but as a reminder of how valuable each moment is. If you can remember that, you will live more fully than most people ever do. Dr. Kenji died peacefully that evening. Those who witnessed his final months said they had never seen anyone meet death with such calm grace and such aliveness. His example became a quiet teaching for the village. It showed how accepting impermanence can change the way we experience life. This story points to a simple truth. When we truly understand that time is limited, we stop taking moments for granted. We begin to meet life with more presence, more tenderness, and more gratitude. Most of us know we will not live forever, yet we behave as if we have unlimited time. We postpone important conversations. We delay what matters. We rush through ordinary days while waiting for some future day, when we will finally slow down. But when impermanence becomes real in the heart, everything changes. We begin to approach each experience with care. This moment will never return exactly as it is. That is not a sad thought. It is a wake-up call to value what is here. The teaching of impermanence is not meant to darken life. It is meant to help us love life more completely. Like cherry blossoms that feel more precious because they fade, our moments become more meaningful when we remember they do not last. When we are fully present, instead of worrying about the future or replaying the past, the mind can finally rest. Peace becomes simple. It becomes close. This recognition naturally leads us toward the deeper integration of all these teachings. When we see that each moment is irreplaceable, we are ready to rest in the quiet truth that has been here all along. The peace that comes from being present for the gift of existence itself. An old woman named Chio lived alone in a small cottage at the edge of a village. She had spent her whole life there raising children, caring for her husband until his death, and helping neighbors through many seasons of joy and sorrow. Now in her 80s, she lived quietly, with memory, and with a simple routine. Every morning before dawn, Chio sat on her wooden porch and watched the world wake. She listened to the first birds. She felt the cool morning air on her skin. She noticed the slow change of light as the sun rose over the mountains. This quiet sitting became her favorite part of the day. One morning, as she sat in her usual place, a young monk walked quickly along the path in front of her cottage. His face carried worry and frustration. When he saw the old woman, he slowed and approached her. "Honored grandmother," he said, bowing, "I am traveling to study with different masters. I want to understand the deepest teachings of Buddhism. I have been walking many days, and I am still far on my destination. Can you tell me if there are any enlightened teachers in this area?" Chio looked at him with gentle eyes. "What kind of teacher are you seeking?" she asked. "I want someone who has realized the ultimate truth," the monk replied. "Someone who can show me how to be free from suffering. I have studied many texts and practiced various techniques, but I still feel far from awakening. Surely there is a master somewhere who can give me the final teaching I need." Chio was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. "Would you like to sit with me for a while?" she asked. "The morning is beautiful. You look tired." The monk felt impatient to continue his journey, but something in her calm presence made him pause. He sat down on the porch steps beside her. "Tell me," Chio said, "what do you hope to find when you meet this enlightened teacher?" "I want to understand the nature of reality," he answered quickly. "I want to be free from attachment and suffering. I want the peace of true awakening." Chio nodded. "And how will you know when you have found these things?" The question surprised him. "I suppose I will feel different," he said. "More peaceful, more wise. I will know I understand the deepest truths." Chio gestured toward the garden in front of her cottage, where vegetables grew in neat rows. "I planted those in spring," she said. "I tended them through summer. Now I harvest what I need each day. When I eat those vegetables, am I experiencing the nature of reality?" The monk looked confused. "In a way," he said, "but that is ordinary life. I am seeking something deeper than daily activities." Chio smiled and pointed to a small bird that had landed nearby. "This little bird does not seem burdened by attachment," she said. "It takes what it needs and moves on. It does not seem to be seeking enlightenment, yet it looks free. What do you think it knows that you do not know?" The monk watched the bird peck at the ground, then fly away without hesitation. "That is instinct," he said. "A bird does not have consciousness like we do." "Are you sure?" Chio asked. "How do you know what the bird experiences? And how do you know your mind needs to be so complicated?" They sat in silence for a few minutes. Morning light filtered through the trees. A breeze moved through the garden. The village began to wake, softly. After a while, the monk spoke again, slower this time. "Sitting here feels more peaceful than I have felt in months of intense practice." Chio nodded. "What do you think is different about this moment?" she asked. The monk considered. "I am not trying to achieve anything," he said. "I am not analyzing or chasing answers. I am just here." "And how does that feel?" Chio asked. "Natural," he said. "Easy, like I can finally stop pushing." Chio stood slowly and began preparing to tend her garden. "I have been sitting on this porch every morning for 40 years, she said. "I have watched thousands of sunrises. Each morning is familiar, and each morning is new." She looked at the monk with kindness. "You asked about enlightened teachers. I think the morning is your teacher. The bird is your teacher. Your own breath is your teacher. And the peace you feel right now is your teacher too." Something shifted in the monk. "Are you saying what I seek is already here?" he asked. Chio gave a small laugh. "I am not saying anything," she replied. But answer this for yourself. Right now, in this moment, are you suffering? Are you confused? Are you failing to experience truth? The monk looked around. The soft light, the quiet garden, the simple presence of the old woman, his own breathing, the ease in his body. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt different. "It is so simple," he whispered. "Yes," Chio said. "So simple that we often miss it while searching for something complicated." The monk stayed with Chio for 3 days, not to learn special techniques and not to hear grand lectures, but to practice simple presence. He helped her with daily tasks. He sat with her in the morning. He discovered that the peace he was seeking was available in ordinary moments when he stopped chasing it elsewhere. When he continued his journey, he was no longer hunting for a distant master. He had learned that awakening is not found in a faraway place or achieved through strain. It is the natural state of awareness when it stops fighting itself. Years later, the monk would tell his own students, "The greatest teacher I ever met was an old woman who taught me nothing and gave me everything." This story gathers the threads of what we have been exploring: acceptance and letting go, compassion and mindfulness, wisdom and non-attachment. Again and again, the same truth returns. Peace is not something we force into existence. It is something we uncover when we stop struggling against what is. Like the monk on Chio's porch, we find the deepest rest when we stop trying so hard to find it. We discover the clearest teaching when we become present to the simple reality of this moment. Now, one final story: a quiet return home. Master Ren had spent 50 years teaching students about practice and philosophy. His temple became known throughout the region, and people traveled great distances to hear him speak. He was respected for his knowledge and his ability to answer difficult questions. But as Master Ren grew older, something changed. Instead of long explanations, he began responding with simpler answers. Instead of complex practices, he suggested that students sit quietly and breathe. Some students were confused. They came expecting profound teachings, yet their master seemed to offer only what they had learned years ago. One evening, a senior student approached him. "Master," the student said, "your teaching feels different now. Are you well? Have you forgotten the deeper aspects of the Dharma?" Master Ren smiled and invited the student to sit with him on the temple porch, where they could watch the first stars appear. "Tell me," the master said, "when you first came here 10 years ago, what were you seeking?" "Enlightenment," the student replied. "Freedom from suffering, understanding of ultimate reality." "And have you found these things?" Master Ren asked. The student hesitated. "I have learned much," he said. "My practice has deepened, but I still feel there is something more I need to understand or achieve." Master Ren pointed to a bright star that had just appeared. "Do you see that star?" he asked. "Yes, Master." "What is it doing?" The student looked uncertain. "It is shining," he said. "Is it trying to shine?" Master Ren asked. "Is it working hard to be bright? Is it seeking to become a better star?" "No," the student said. "It is simply shining." Master Ren nodded. "And yet its light crosses a great distance to reach your eyes. Without effort, it offers light to anyone who looks up." They sat quietly as more stars appeared in the deepening sky. "When I was a young teacher," Master Ren said, "I thought my job was to give complicated practices and powerful insights. I believed awakening was difficult and far away, something that required years of struggle to reach." He lifted his gaze to the sky. "But look at this teaching that appears each clear night. The stars do not struggle to shine. The sky does not strain to be spacious. The night does not try to be quiet. And yet here is a perfect demonstration of our true nature, simple and steady. The student looked up, and something in him softened. "You are saying our nature is like the stars," he said, "naturally bright, without effort." Master Ren gave a small laugh. "I am not saying anything," he replied, "but tell me what you experience when you stop trying to solve everything and simply rest in awareness, like the open space that holds these stars." As they sat in the quiet night, the student felt his mind settle. The usual questions and seeking began to fade. He was not trying to meditate or achieve a special state. It was simply present, like the stars simply shining. "Master," he said at last, "I think I understand why your teaching has become so simple." "And why is that?" Master Ren asked. "Because what we are looking for is so simple that complex teachings can cover it up." Master Ren nodded. "After 50 years," he said, "I have learned that the most profound truth is also the most obvious. People come looking for complicated wisdom, but what they truly need is to remember how to rest in their own natural awareness." He stood slowly and prepared to go inside. The stars have been giving the same teaching every night for millions of years. They shine simply because that is their nature, not because they are trying to become something else. And when we remember that we, too, can simply be what we are, without struggling, the peace we have been searching for becomes close again. That night, the student slept more deeply than he had in years, not because he learned something new, but because he relaxed into something old and natural, something that had been present all along. He discovered that the peace he wanted was the peace of awareness itself, not an achievement, but his original nature. And now, this brings us full circle. We may begin the evening thinking we need transformation, something to fix, something to reach, but the path gently shows us another truth. What we seek is not far away. It is the ground we have been standing on. As you rest, you may notice the body settling, supported by the surface beneath you. You may notice the breath slowing on its own, as the nervous system recognizes the safety of this moment. You may notice the mind growing quieter, as it realizes it does not have to search for something better somewhere else. These teachings have guided countless people toward freedom for more than 2,000 years. They have traveled across time like starlight reaching the eyes, arriving quietly, without force, and they leave small seeds in awareness that will grow in their own time. There is nothing more you need to do tonight, nothing to achieve, nothing to solve. The path continues not through effort, but through simple remembering. Like water finding its level, like stars shining without trying, peace appears through allowing. Our gentle journey through these timeless stories now comes to a close. We have moved through acceptance and letting go, compassion and mindfulness, wisdom and freedom. Again and again, each story has pointed to the same quiet truth. The peace you want is not distant. It is here, in this moment, not something to earn, but something to recognize. The ancient masters rest with you now in the still space of awareness. The same Buddha nature that awakened in them is present in you. These teachings will continue their quiet work as you sleep, settling into deeper layers like seeds in fertile ground. There is nothing more you need to do. Let the body sink into rest. Let the breath deepen naturally. Let the mind release the day. The peace you touched through these stories is always available, always waiting. May you rest deeply in the sanctuary of your own peaceful nature. May you wake tomorrow with a gentle remembering of the quiet simplicity that lives at your center. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it outside. Tonight, you have turned inward and found that this ancient truth still holds. Peace does not require perfect circumstances. It is the natural state of awareness when it stops fighting what is. The great Zen masters knew that awakening is not far away. It is the simple recognition of what has always been present. Like the moon reflected in still water, your true nature has been shining quietly all along, waiting only for the waves of thought to settle. In this stillness, you remember what the ancients called the original face, the awareness that existed before any story about being separate. The middle way lives in your breathing, now neither forcing nor resisting, simply allowing. Compassion softens the heart. Impermanence teaches the hands to hold life lightly. You are not only hearing these teachings, in small, quiet ways, you are living them. Rest now in the silence that holds all sound, the spaciousness that allows everything to be.